Welcome to Mr. C's story time. Settle in, get comfortable, and listen closely. Tonight's story is called Monster Hill. Pat lay with the covers pulled up over his chin. The wind blew against the windows, making them shake. But Pat did not mind. He was warm, cozy in his bed. It was just then that he heard his dad calling. "Pat, get up, you sleepyhead. It's time to get up." Pat would rather have stayed in bed, but it was then that he remembered his dad was taking him out for a surprise. He jumped out of bed, washed, brushed his teeth, and went downstairs. He sat at the table and swung his legs. When he sat at the chair, he could not reach the floor. "What's for breakfast?" he asked. "Chocolate porridge," his dad said. Pat had already guessed what it was going to be, as he could smell the chocolate was coming down the stairs. Pat loved chocolate porridge. He really did love chocolate porridge. Pat smiled and rubbed his tummy. His dad placed a big bowl of chocolate porridge in front of Pat. Pat lifted his spoon and started to eat and eat until his bowl was empty. He looked over at his dad's bowl. There was some left. "Have you finished?" Pat asked. His dad said yes. So Pat ate his dad's leftover chocolate porridge as well. He was feeling rather full, and he rubbed his belly with a big smile on his face. "Oh, yummy," said Pat. His dad had brought Pat's Wellingtons in, and Pat was busy putting them on. "Why do I need Wellingtons?" Pat asked. "Well, it was raining last night, and winter is coming in fast. It might be muddy where we are going," his dad replied. Pat liked his Wellingtons because he was allowed to jump up and down in muddy puddles when he had them on. He also put on his big coat and his warm gloves. He was going to make sure he was warm and dry. Pat and his dad got into the car and put on their seatbelts, and then his dad drove them off on their adventure. "Where are we going?" asked Pat. His dad smiled. "Monster Hill," he answered. Pat wasn't sure he wanted to go to a hill with monsters, but they parked the car in a special car park in the country at the bottom of Giant Hill. Pat got out of the car and looked up at the giant hill. It was enormous and covered in dark trees. "I'm not sure I want to go to Monster Hill," Pat said. His dad held his hand and smiled down at Pat. "There's nothing to worry about when I'm with you," he said, smiling. Pat did think his dad was very brave, and any monster would be scared to go near his dad. They walked to the bottom of the hill through the muddy field. Pat and his dad laughed as they slipped and slid their way over the muddy field. By the time they reached the bottom of the hill, Pat's Wellingtons were very heavy with mud. He was walking slowly with big, heavy, muddy boots. He laughed as he watched his dad trying to clean the mud from his boots, but he did manage to get more mud all over himself than he got from the boots. Finally, they had reached the steps on the side of the hill. "Here we are," said his dad, "the giant steps." "Giants," Pat said, "as well as monsters." His dad laughed. "Well, the monsters scared away all the giants." The steps were very big, and Pat needed his dad to help him climb the stairs. Pat tried to count the steps, but he kept forgetting how many there were. But slowly, step by step, they climbed up the hill. Pat wasn't really wanting to reach the top of the stairs in case the monsters were waiting for him. Pat stopped near the top. "Dad, will the monster be waiting for us?" he asked. "Not today," his dad said, "but don't worry, I'll look after you." And they carried on up the remainder of the steps. Pat looked behind him. He was so high up, and he was sure he was in the clouds, and he wondered if the birds could actually fly this high. Pat looked around the woods. This looked like fun, he thought. Not so scary, now he was here. The wind blew through the trees, making noises as it passed through the trees. "I like the wind," his dad said. "It's like the wind's talking to the trees when it blows like this." They walked for a while and came across a tree that had fallen down. "Can I climb along the tree?" Pat asked. "Yes, see if you can make it to the end and not have to touch the ground," his dad said. Pat had to try 3 times before he managed to make it to the end. He might have had to hold his dad's hand, but he did make it to the end, and his dad had hugged him and told him how proud he was of Pat. "I am so glad you kept trying and didn't give up." He also told him it was okay to ask for help if it was hard to do on his own. They carried on around the woods and the hill and came to a path that went deeper into the trees. "What's down there?" Pat asked. The monster," his dad answered. "Shall we go and look?" No," said Pat. "I don't think I would like to go there." His dad bent down and held Pat's hand as he looked at Pat. "I think you will like this monster," his dad said, smiling. Pat wasn't sure he would like the monster, but he held his dad's hand and walked along the path, making sure he looked for monsters as they went. "Almost there," his dad said. Pat could hear laughter and talking further up the path. Pat looked at his dad smiled and said, "That's the monsters having fun." Pat still wasn't sure he wanted to see the monster, even if it was having fun. "Cover your eyes," his dad said, "and open them when I say." Pat hid his eyes and carried on walking, holding on to his dad's hand, squeezing it very tight. His dad stopped and told Pat, "Open your eyes." One eye, and then both eyes. He looked and started to laugh. "That's not a monster," Pat said, and he was right, because in front of them stood a building with swings and slides and models of dinosaurs. They had ladders in them with places to play hide and seek. "That's not a monster," and his dad pointed to a big sign, and his dad read the words out. "The Monster Cafe," his dad said, "and we all know the hill as Monster Hill because of Monster Hill Cafe and Play Area." Pat laughed and played on the dinosaurs and the slides until it was time to go home. "What a great day," Pat said as he walked back to the car. Thank you for listening to Monster Hill. I hope you enjoyed the story, and I'll see you again soon for another story with Mr. C.